Good morning. Our prelude today is number 1008 from the Teal Book, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Hi, I'm John Brockman, volunteer with the 1U AV team, Eclectic Music Collective, and the Black Cat Cafe. A warm welcome to you and thank you for joining First Unitarian Church of Orlando Sunday service. In the words of Dan Lambert, you are welcome here no matter who you are, no matter where you came from, no matter what your background. You are welcome here to join us as we proclaim worth in our spiritual journeys. You are welcome to join us as we sing songs that uplift our very beings. You are welcome to join us in a community as we learn, live, and love together. For more information on our congregation, please go to www.orlandouu.org or email welcometeam@orlandouu.org. We're happy you're here today. Today after worship at 11:30, we have an all-church congregational meeting, so our usual after-service fellowship and welcome center will not be available. It will resume, however, next Sunday. You should have received information about this meeting and a link and a passcode. Here's how to access the meeting. We encourage all members, friends, and guests to attend and hear reports on what's going on. Only members may vote, however. We're voting online this time. In our democratically governed church, congregational meetings are important, so we look forward to seeing all of you there. We'll repeat this slide at the end of the service today. As always, for the latest news on our congregation, check out our weekly update that's sent on Friday and posted on the homepage of our website. From the first day I came to 1U, I was welcomed by a diverse community of people, a variety of experiences, talents, and a strong sense of community exuded from everyone, not only in word, but in action within the extended community. That said, it's imperative to me that we support the many ministries of this church. If you'd like to make an offering to support the many ministries of this congregation, please go to orlandouu.org and click the donate button in the upper right corner. Or you can send a text or send a check. It's great being together. Now let's gather and worship.
My life flows on in endless song above us lamentation. I hear the real, the far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. What though the tempest round me in endless storm above the ground? What though the dawn I hear bells round me though far off here it giveth? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? How can I keep from singing? How can I keep? How can I keep from singing?
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is from the Reverend Angela Herrera. Don't leave your broken heart at the door. Bring it to the altar of life. Don't leave your anger behind. It has high standards, and the world needs vision. Bring them with you, and your joy and your passion. Bring your loving and your courage and your conviction. Bring your need for healing and your powers to heal. There is work to do, and you have all that you need to do it right here this morning. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. We're the Peabody family. I'm Dale.
I'm Bonnie.
I'm Ethan.
I'm Katie.
Unitarian Universalists light a chalice at the beginning of worship to set aside this time as sacred time. Please say with me our familiar words. In the light of truth, in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Gray, religious educator here at First Unitarian Church of Orlando. So, as of this recording, we still don't know the final results of the election for the next president of the United States of America. It's possible by the time you're watching this on Sunday, we still won't have a clear answer. But no matter what the end result ends up being, one thing has become abundantly clear. The United States is a very deeply divided nation. And no matter what happens, we have a great amount of very difficult work ahead of us in order to heal our country. So how do we even begin this work? How do we deal with the fact that half of the people in our country think so differently and believe so differently than the other half of the country? And not only that, how do we deal with the fact that both of these halves are so convinced that their way of thinking is the right one that they're unable to even talk to each other sometimes, let alone resolve any differences? I don't have the answers. I really wish I did. But I do know that we have a really long road of healing ahead of us. And something that I have found helpful in times like this is returning to some of our 7 UU principles. The seventh principle is all about the interconnected web of life of which we are all a part. This book I'm about to read speaks to that truth that, like it or not, we are all bound to one another in an intricate, complicated web of life. So join me as we read about this in The Invisible Web. The Invisible Web by Patrice Karst, illustrated by Joanne Lou Friedhoff. The very best news ever has begun to spread all over the world, one heart at a time. Shout it from the mountaintops. Every single one of us is connected to those we love by invisible strings. This means Giovanna and her daddy are always together, even though he moved to a new house. Omar can feel the tugs of love from his parents, even though he is living far away at school. Mr. Chang still feels Mrs. Chang close by, even though she died such a very long time ago. And you, at this very moment, may feel the string of someone close to you, even though they aren't there. You can't see it, but it's real. Our strings reach to everyone we know. They travel far and wide, to families and friends, classmates and coaches, to bus drivers and babysitters, neighbors and pets, to aunts and uncles and grandparents and grandchildren and countless other people. And all of those people have hundreds of strings. Soaring high over rocky peaks and across the seven seas, deep into jungles and valleys, and winding through the busiest of cities, all these strings crisscross one another and create a nest that covers the planet, interlacing us together, cradling us forever. The invisible web. The web has no borders and wraps every continent. Within it live butterflies and flowers, starfish and seahorses, lions and ants, rivers and snowstorms, and all human beings, Giovanna, Omar, Mr. Chang, and of course, you and me too. Some say it even reaches to our ancestors and those we cherish in the beyond. One tug on a string sends love to every one of us woven together in this divine tapestry, and that means just one good deed travels across the entire web. Everything is linked. But sometimes folks forget. When they can't feel their strings, they forget about our invisible web, and that's when strings get tangled up. Like when lonely Louisa isn't invited to sit with anyone at her school at lunchtime. Or when sad Stefano wishes his friend Marcos wasn't so bossy when they played. Or when Mrs. Patel struggles at work without help and she just wants to quit. Even violence and war can erupt when too many of us forget the web. When strings are ignored, they can become weak and begin to unravel. But the more people who care for the web, the stronger it remains. The web feels like every parent since the beginning of time, holding and protecting each one of us in millions of gentle arms. What can be stronger than all of those hands holding us close? So many supportive fingers can always find a way to untangle strings so that love can flow again. But it's up to every one of us to spread the word. Our time is right now. As we tell our family and friends, sisters will remind brothers, who will write to cousins, who will call their great-grandparents, who will just smile and nod as if they have always known. If we remember the web and tug at it often, nobody will ever be left out. We will see others more clearly. The people of the world will look into each other's eyes. They will smile at one another, and when one of them cries, they will all want to help. And they do. Marcos apologizes to Stefano, who forgives his friend, and they have even more fun playing. Someone helps Mrs. Patel at work and tells her what a great job she's doing. She remembers that she's important and feels happy. And Louisa feels warm and bubbly inside when a few of the kids in her class ask her to join them under the banyan tree for lunch. She knows right then that the invisible web is real. After school, Louisa cries with joy as she strokes her cat, who purrs the news to the stars, and the stars whisper the secrets to the clouds, who share it with the songbirds, who serenade the world with this exquisite melody of love at the start of each morning and all during the day, until, as the invisible web glitters in the magic of twilight, the owls take over and hoot the news throughout the night. The invisible web is alive. Its time is right now. It breathes as we breathe, pulsating all over our earth, the single heartbeat of life and love. And do you know what makes us all? And do you know what that makes us all? One very big family. P.S. I just love being right here in the very middle of the invisible web with you. Patrice Karst, dedicated to the real World Wide Web.
Thank you so much for joining me. This book is actually the companion book to a book that we read together months ago at the beginning of the pandemic called The Invisible String. This book, as you saw, took that idea of the invisible string that connects us to our loved ones, took it a step further and explored how all these different strings bind us together with everyone in our families, in our communities, and in our country. As we navigate how to begin this work to repair, like literally bring two pairs of one whole back together, I think it's important to recognize and remember these connections to one another, and that could help us take a step in the right direction.
We set aside time in our worship for the hearing of the joys and concerns in our congregation and in the world. In our congregation, we want to remember Neil as he recovers from the planned surgery he had several days ago. And in our congregation and in the wider nation, we want to honor all of the feelings that we've had during the recent election, all the emotions, all the concern, all the ambiguity about the election, and also the hope and the possibility that we have felt here and there. As we continue to work out the issues of the election, we want to honor where we are as we move forward. We want to especially thank all the poll workers in this congregation. Our church campus is a polling site in this precinct. We've had so many volunteers who did so much great work in this very important time in the life of our nation. And especially we want to honor Gabby for managing all of the volunteers and all of the events, for working with the Election Commission. And all in all, it was an excellent day of service to our community. And we honor the unspoken concerns that may be with us this morning. We know that the light of the sacred shines into the dark and broken places of our lives and all life. Now let's take a deep and cleansing breath, mindful of how this simple act honors our interdependence with each other and with all. And now let's sing to open our hearts.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain still will remain, singing. Call
When we go into the silence, please use either Facebook comments or Zoom chat to name anyone in your life who needs prayer, remembering, or honoring in our communion of names. Our meditation and prayer today is adapted from Viola Abbott. Let us open our hearts. Let us still our minds. Let us be thankful for this opportunity for healing, forgiveness, and reconciliation, while knowing that we should never forget what has brought us here today. Let us be glad that voice has not only been given to those whose sorrow and pain were their companions in this faith, but that the stories told by those voices have been received with a goal of redemption and understanding. Let us call upon that light which shines in each of us to give us the strength to walk together into the future and do the work that is necessary and which does not end here today. Let us have the wisdom to lovingly have the conversations we need to have with each other, that we must have with each other, to grow this faith in radical love and inclusion. We remember all those among us and in our wider community who were hurting in any manner of body, mind, or spirit. We affirm hope, possibility, vision, for each, for all. And now, with the private meditations of our hearts, we enter the silence in the communion of names. And so it is. Amen. Blessed be.
When I wake up in America, I see my neighbors there with every type of clothes and shoes, hats and skin and hair, every fine belief and custom, scores of songs from who knows where. When I wake up in America, our stories fill the air. Wake up, despierta. Wake up, despierta. Wake up in America. The light in the harbor shines for us all. When I wake up, I see the kids playing happily swaying. It's good to be staying in a place like this, with a face like this. When I wake up in America, I put away my fear, and I love my neighbor as myself. And I say, I'm glad that you're here. We have found ourselves together in a land we dream could be. When we wake up in America, everybody will be free. Wake up, despierta. Wake up, despierta. Wake up, please, America. The light in the harbor shines for us all. when I wake up, when you wake up, when we wake up in America.
Molly Ivins was a well-known newspaper columnist in Dallas, Texas, where I'm from, and became syndicated and became more famous than she had thought she might. She was known for her firebrand liberal opinions and her no-nonsense syntax. Here's one of her many quotes. She said, "The thing about democracy, beloveds, is that it is not neat, orderly, or quiet. It requires a certain relish for confusion." Well, this election season, we've certainly had more than a relish of confusion, and certainly more than mere confusion. Over the last 4 years, we've been at times shocked, angry, frustrated, alarmed and fearful, sad, brokenhearted, especially maybe brokenhearted. Parker J. Palmer, the Quaker writer and activist, in one of his many books, Healing the Heart of Democracy, that he published almost a decade ago at a time that in retrospect looks awfully innocent, although he did a pretty good job of seeing some of the seeds and the early foliage of what was going on. In that book, he speaks a lot of being brokenhearted. He's open about his struggles with depression, and he defines that as a form of brokenheartedness. He says that being brokenhearted can, he says, expand one's sense of connectedness and evoke the heart's capacity to employ tension in the service of life. He speaks of President Lincoln, who also suffered from depression. In those days, it was called melancholy. Lincoln knew well, he said, what it was like to struggle with a heavy heart. And perhaps because of that, he was able to lead with such clarity and tenderness and skill the nation through the Civil War, invoking even then a sense of common purpose, as he said in his second inaugural address, "with malice toward none and charity for all," even as he was promulgating the war against slavery. Parker says of Lincoln, "Lincoln has much to teach us about embracing political tension as a way that opens our hearts to each other, no matter how deep our differences. That way begins in here as we work on reconciling whatever divides us from ourselves, and then moves out with healing power into a world of many divides, drawing light out of darkness, community out of chaos, and life out of death." As a nation, we are certainly divided. That's an understatement. Our political camps have become so defined as to wall us off from each other. We have different news sources, we read different publications, we likely go to different churches by and large. The extreme divisions we see today are exaggerated, felt larger, more impenetrable than before. Our nation has long been a diverse nation, and that diversity has empowered our democracy. In his book, Parker says, "At the center of America's public life is a marketplace of ideas that only a free people could create. A vital, colorful, chaotic bazaar of religious, philosophical, political, and intellectual convictions. When democracy is working as it should, It is a complex and confusing mess where we can think and act as we choose within the rule of law, can generate social and technological advances via the creative conflict of ideas, and can still manage to come together for the sake of the common good. In these days, it seems we have lost agreement on what constitutes that common good. Well, we've had different ideas about that for generations, if not for centuries. But in the recent decades, our divisions have become deeper, more strident, even in families and among friends. How to build bridges across some of these divides? This is not to say that these differences don't matter. Of course they do. It is said elections have consequences, and certainly so do ideas. Ideas have consequences. There are some ideas that are dangerous, unhealthy, they don't serve the common good. Building bridges does not mean avoiding the difficult, getting along for the sake of getting along. We can be ourselves, witness to our own values, while staying connected to others. As I said, Parker is from the Quaker tradition. In his book, he tells the story of John Woolman, a Quaker who lived in the mid-18th century. He died in 1772, just a few years before the official creation of our nation. Woolman was a merchant, an itinerant Quaker preacher who lived in colonial New Jersey, among other merchants and farmers who were Quaker, and whose affluence was dependent in part upon enslaving human beings. Woolman was a tailor. He did not own slaves himself because he believed deeply that doing so was a contradiction for a Quaker. Quakers had clear teachings about human equality, and Woolman couldn't understand how a Quaker could abide by owning another human soul. Parker said, he refused to make that tension disappear by ignoring it, using theological sleight of hand, or riding its energy toward violence. Instead, he insisted that his community hold that tension with honesty and resolve with integrity by freeing their slaves. For 20 years, he lived and worked among his Quaker communities up and down the East Coast, visiting other friends, that's friends with a capital F, meaning Quakers, in their homes, shops, farms, and meetings and congregations. And in his work, he spoke with others about what he saw as a heartbreaking contradiction between their faith and their practice. He would, even if he visited a home where a slave had cooked a meal, he would fast from that meal and yet stay at the table to engage with the family seated there. So he stayed connected to his community, even while paying close attention to not benefiting himself from any slave labor. Finally, as we know in history, the Quakers agreed quite early in our history as a community to reconcile that difference, free their slaves, and witness and work for the freedom of all slaves, some 80 years before the Civil War. They went on to have a key role in the abolitionist movement. Getting to that place took years of engagement, reflection, work, and no doubt there were many, many disappointments along the way. Especially they, being good Quakers, used reflection before they, as we say, saw the light of truth, of freedom, of the dignity of all souls. At this point in history, we are ministering to some of those contradictions in American life, working to reconcile those contradictions. And to do the work well, to do the healing work it entails, requires that we stay connected to others, all others, in the web that is American life. We cannot wall ourselves off in a neat and clean ivory tower that's separate from the hoi polloi of common American life. I am not saying that we bridge differences into a mushy moderation. Jim Hightower, another columnist from Texas, I apologize for having so many Texas references here, and another activist said famously, "There's nothing in the middle of the road except yellow stripes and dead armadillos." Now, I don't know if we here in Florida have armadillos. They're lovely, beautiful creatures who walk very slowly, and their travels across highways is not very effective, needless to say. That is to say that we can be who we are, and we can do the work that we need to do, regardless of who is president, which party is in ascension, and stay connected to our fellow American citizens. And it's about more than mere politics. It's also about community life. One of the real unique qualities I see in this congregation is its relationship to the wider community of Orlando, most notably in being a polling place, but also in so many other arenas, notably in its response, your response to the Pulse crisis of several years ago, and its connections generally to the wider community. There is so much healing work to be done in these days, and we ourselves need healing and need to be mindful about doing that interior work of healing from the rank divisiveness we've seen, from the ways that we've experienced the othering of us. Our response to that othering of us is not to, if you'll pardon, others. It is not to take an eye for an eye, but to move forward in love, the difficult love of those with whom we disagree deeply, to help our society reconcile some of its inherent contradictions. Regardless of the outcomes of this election, if by the time we hear this sermon we know the outcome of this election, regardless of the outcomes, we will go forward, of course. Our work, our healing work in the world, continues regardless of who is president, regardless of which party is dominant in our various branches of government. In conclusion, let me quote the Reverend Vicky Safford, where she said, "We have always lived in unprecedented times. The volume's been turned up for sure now. The heat is way hotter, the danger less carefully cloaked. But tyrants are always arising, and here in our country and elsewhere in every age, everywhere, resistance rises too. Hope arises too. Courage and love and creative nonviolent rebellion also rise up, and they always have. No matter what happens, we are not going back. We are carrying our history forward into what Langston Hughes called the America that yet shall be." Finally, Molly Ivins again. She said, "So keep fighting for freedom and for justice. But don't forget to have fun doing it. Be outrageous. Rejoice in all the oddities that freedom can produce. And when you get through celebrating the sheer joy of a good fight, be sure to tell those who come after how much fun it was." We are ready, even now, to minister in these unprecedented times and have fun doing it. So may it be. Amen.
Oh, hear my people, hear me well. I have no need for sacrifice, but mercy, loving kindness shall alone for and lead us to a mastery, or drives in us that war pursue. May deeds we do inscribe our names as blessings in the book of life. O source of peace, lead us to heal. O source of peace, lead us from strife.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Ethan, blow it out. Yay! Bye, everybody.
Remember, my friends, we haven't just been to church, we are the church. And when the church is the church, it is nothing more, it is nothing less, it is nothing other than a place of hope and healing and courage. Go forth this week and be the church. Go in grace. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me.